And I'm afraid the news does not get better for the Athenians even after the ostracism of Hyperbolus. Because in the following year, 416 BC, the Athenians had their first of several opportunities to vent their venom against the Spartans. One of the few islands in the Aegean Sea that never joined the Delian League was this island of Melos. If you check on your map, you'll see that Melos is in the southern Aegean Sea, north of Crete. Melos and its counterpart Thera, a little bit north of it, were two of the islands in the Aegean Sea, two of the very few islands that were never members of the Delian League. We don't hear anything else about Thera, but Melos plays a suddenly vital role at this particular juncture in the Peloponnesian War. The Athenians had believed that the Melians would remain neutral in the Peloponnesian War, assisting neither Athenians nor Spartans. Word, however, got to the Athenians in 416 BC that the Melians had actually supplied secret aid to the Spartans. The Athenians did not stop to question the veracity of that claim. They immediately mounted an attack against the essentially defenseless island of Melos. The Melians called for help from the Spartans, but never received it, and the Athenians moved forward and besieged the island through the winter into 415 BC, forced it to surrender, and completely destroyed it. We have a very interesting dialogue provided in the history of Thucydides between Athenian representatives and the Melian government. It's referred to as the Melian dialogue. And it's a point when we have an additional insight, just like with the funeral oration of Pericles, into the politics of the time and the tenor of how Greek cities would interact with each other. It's a pretty discouraging picture. And when we realize that the same year, 415 BC, the conclusion of the Melian dialogue is also, in the Siege of Melos, is when the Trojan Women is published by Euripides, one of our plays in this class, we realize that this is in fact quite a tragic period that makes a play like this possible. We're actually going to return to talk about the Trojan Women play in a separate video, but I'll bring it up here because this is where it's relevant to this spot in the Peloponnesian War. So, okay, first of all, the dialogue in the history. You have the two cities essentially exchanging words with each other about whether the siege of Melos by the Athenians is in fact just. The Melians claim that it's not. The Melians claim that they never made an outright promise to the Athenians never to actually aid the Spartans. And the Melians claim that if the Athenians move in and take over the Melians and try to punish them as completely as they plan to do, itself an unjust action in their view, that the Melians will call for assistance from the Spartans. The Athenians dismiss both of these. They say to the Melians that the Spartans are in no position to come and help because the Spartans are very slow in responding to requests out at sea, being much too preoccupied with what's going on land, and not really having at that time a sufficient fleet. This is before Lysander. And also the Athenians say that their own position, is much stronger than that of the Melians. And therefore, as the stronger city, they have the right to invest and rule over the weaker. Interestingly, we have an echo of this in an entirely different piece of literature much earlier than Thucydides' history, in the work called Works and Days by Hesiod, in which he cites the fable of the hawk and the nightingale, in which the nightingale, a beautiful bird sitting up on top of a tree, is singing shrilly and attracts the attention of a hawk who comes along and grabs it and takes it away, and the nightingale begins to shriek. The hawk immediately tells the nightingale basically to be quiet, because the hawk is going to take the nightingale wherever the hawk pleases. The nightingale can do nothing about it because the hawk is stronger and the nightingale is weaker, so the nightingale has to submit to the hawk. In this like manner, the Athenians tell the Melians that it's the duty of the Melians simply to submit to the will of the Athenians by surrendering, and maybe therefore receiving perhaps some merciful treatment, because the Athenians are stronger than the Melians. Not surprisingly, the Melians reject this. They are in fact besieged through the winter, and they end up being completely destroyed. Now, this is one of several what one could call terror episodes that occurred during the Peloponnesian War. And this is, in fact, unprecedented in Greek history, pretty much, for a Greek historian to document it this way. I will not say that the terror is actually occurring for the first time. That certainly is not the case, because there have been plenty of wars with plenty of horrific acts occurring long before this. A quick read of Homer's Iliad gives us notice of that. But the specific kind of use of fear and psychology to force an issue upon an opponent politically, as well as the use of military force, that combination does seem to be unprecedented up to this point in Greek history from our sources. And the way the Athenians essentially play the Melians this way and eventually force their way upon the defenseless island is something that, even by Athenian standards, is pretty horrifying. This will come back to haunt the Athenians when they are potentially going to be visited similar treatment by the Spartans, when the Spartans will eventually defeat them, as will be documented by the historian Xenophon at the conclusion of the Peloponnesian War. So take note of this important episode and recognize that this is the year, again, when Euripides publishes his very critical play, Trojan Women, to tell the Athenians that if they think that they should be so high and mighty because they're going to succeed in war against a small island Melos, they should remember innocent victims like the women and children who end up being taken slaves, and in many cases have very little part in the original crime that brought about the war in the first place, and definitely have no cause for the type of treatment inflicted upon them in the form of slavery. The Athenians were not very happy at the production of this play and gave it second place. It was one of many examples that Euripides used to offer his critical opinion of the Athenians when he felt it was due. And I would imagine that quite a few people shared his opinion in this particular instance. Okay, we now will begin turning to the next very important episode in Athenian history, one of their most drastic, and that is the Sicilian expedition, which will take up our next few videos, the years 415 to 413 BC. We'll see you next video.